You are now live.
We are now live. Can somebody hit the got it?
Yeah.
We got it. Gotta get it. Got it.
Got it.
We got it. All right, we're live. This is Senate Finance. This is Wednesday, March 30th, and today we are going to start with H489. This is miscellaneous provisions affecting health insurance regulations. And
Is this our first time, Madam Chair?
I think this is,
I just see possible vote here, so.
oh, well, let's walk through this.
It's always possible.
Yeah, okay, so,
So you have had a walkthrough of this. This is the one that DFR came in on.
okay, so we've got I think some other proposals coming to us. So first on the agenda is Sarah Teachout. And Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Cummings and members of the Senate Finance Committee. I am Sarah Teachout from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Vermont. And I am coming again to talk to you about the unmerged or merged individual and small group marketplace. And I realize you've already discussed this topic once already, and you had amended an earlier bill to say that the markets here in Vermont would remain unmerged only if Congress enacts the advanced premium tax credit extension. So, and I appreciated that at the time. The more that we look at what's happening at the federal level, the more uncertainty I have around Congress passing them in time for the September 1st deadline. So in the course of doing that, I also had our actuaries do some analysis of what the impact of merging the marketplace actually does for Vermonters, and on which groups of Vermonters. So I provided that, I believe, to Faith, but I'm not seeing it on your website. It's a document that says unmerging
Your chest.
individual group.
Yeah, I have impact. I do have it.
You have, okay. I'm not going to put it on the screen because then I can't see anyone and it's too
Okay.
But I was going to talk through that. So we know from before that small employers in a merged marketplace pay $17.7 million more in premiums by offsetting the risk from individuals. So that's the first line at the top of the graph in the middle of that page. And I've also showed you what would happen with the advanced premium tax credit and without, but this doesn't show the impact of the advanced premium tax credit. I've held that separately. What this is showing you is only the impact of the merging and unmerging of the markets standalone. So the two top lines after the 17.7, so rows 2 and 3 that say directly enrolled and Vermont Health Connect enrolled not eligible for subsidies. Those are groups that don't qualify for any advanced premium tax credit, and the income levels are on the back page, but it's individuals with over 159,700 of income and families of 4 with over 326,000 of income. And I believe head of household is about 179,000 of income. So those enrollees in health insurance through Vermont, either direct or through Vermont Health Connect, are the main beneficiaries of this merged market. So they get a collective $4.1 million of their premiums offset from small employers in the state of Vermont. So the wealthiest individuals are getting offset by small businesses. So then the next two lines are those who qualified for the expanded advanced premium tax credit. So those are over 400% up to where it phases out, the numbers I told you before. And then those who always qualify, those under 400%. So the impact on those under 400%, which is row 5, is very small because they're pretty much receiving the maximum amount of subsidy that they can. The one for those who are impacted by this expanded advanced premium tax credit, you can see if that tax credit is rolled back and not approved by Congress, it's 1.9 million to them. And then it's a much smaller amount. If in fact it's a savings, if they get the federal tax credit, because some of them max out as well. So, and then line 6, I think, is the most important. What we're doing by charging small employers in Vermont 17.7 million more is mostly subsidizing the federal government. So the federal government saves between 11.9 and 13.6 million by having a merged marketplace. So our point is that whether or not these expanded advanced premium tax credits are extended, this makes sense as public policy for the state of Vermont to keep our markets unmerged. Now, we certainly do hope that Congress acts and it extends those subsidies because we know they're very important for the people who qualify. And I do believe they will be extended, but you can't count on that. So what I've tried to show you is an analysis of what happens in either case, whether they're extended or not, to the people who receive a benefit from this policy change. So I tried to keep it high level here, and I'm happy to answer questions. Vermont could choose, and I know that money is tight, to try and replace the 1.9 million if it was necessary, but it may not be necessary. It might be better to just answer your questions if you have some, or if I haven't explained that very well.
So the 1.9 is the enrolled.
Right. So I'll be, those are people
under the 157,000 in income.
They're under the 159, but above 400% of federal poverty level. So those are people who newly qualified for advanced premium tax credits with the federal bill that happened, I think it's 2 years ago now.
Okay.
And those are the ones
that will pay $1.9 million more.
Right.
Do we know what that breaks out to per capita?
Good question, and I don't have the answer for that.
Okay. So you're saying rather than keep bouncing these back and forth, the small employers are going to pay the same under either scenario?
So if we remerge the
They pay
market,
less.
small employers will pay $17.7 million more. And I'm really looking at the perfect storm here. If hospital budgets go up as we're anticipating, and if the federal advanced premium tax credits were not extended, it really would be the small employers that would pay all of those increases. Certainly individuals would be impacted too, but it would be 3 times the bad news for that one particular group.
Okay, I'm still struggling.
I'm sorry.
So you roll back advanced premium tax credits. You say small employers 17.7 million, right?
Yes.
Plus, all right. So if we separate, if we merge the markets, which if Congress doesn't act by September 1st, the markets will be merged. We merge the markets, those small employers are going to pay $17.7 million more. And the federal government is going to make 11.9 million because they will be paying the credits.
They pay less in tax credits to Vermonters.
Okay. I'm having trouble with the parentheses.
Oh.
And the colored lines, but I think the colored lines are just to make it easier to see the lines. Okay. So with rolled back. So if Congress doesn't act, directly enrolled will pay. Now, direct enrolled are those who do not qualify, right?
Correct. And you can add the 3.3 and the 0.8 together to get 4.1. Some
Okay,
of them are directly enrolled through the health insurance company, and some of them are enrolled through Vermont Health Connect, but they don't qualify.
okay. So these are people that are making more than 157,000 an individual and 300 per family. So they would pay more. Individuals only eligible for the expanded, that's the individual market, right?
Correct.
And okay, that's where the big difference comes then, because they're the ones, we separated the market because they were now eligible for the expanded tax credit. So they saved 1.9 million. Or, yeah, about that. Looks like with it, they would have gone down 0.1. But all right, if we separate the markets, it's going to cost them $1.9 million more. But the federal government is going to not pay out 11.9 million in premiums or in credits, right?
Correct. And if Congress comes through and does extend the federal tax credits, that group is kept whole.
Okay. Senator
Madam
Peters.
Chair, my question is for you. It's clear where the industry sits on this because we have their memo, but must say I'm confused by the dynamics, and maybe I missed it when we did the walkthrough, but would it be okay to ask Ledge Council for just an impartial
Yes, this is one.
overview of what the heck
We
we're
did.
talking about?
We did a bill last year, then we came back this year and amended the bill, Jen, and changed the date.
Yeah, and we saved, I mean, the 17 million I recall, because that was what we were saving.
Right. So Jen, can you walk us through what we've done?
Sure. Jennifer Carby, Legislative Counsel. Yes, so this is not in, I don't believe this is this in the bill you're looking at? This is not in the bill that you are looking at. This was standalone language that you passed. I think you included in your budget adjustment proposal. It was.
Okay, that was the
last minute.
It was going to end in June, and we extended it or May.
Well, no, it's already, so it goes through what you did last year, and the expanded eligibility and the unmerged market goes through this plan year, but then it ends at the end of this plan year. And so the language that you had done in budget adjustment that was then included somewhere else, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were talking about this today, so I had not looked. It's in some other bill as well.
That's fine.
Might be in the budget.
I think it was.
So that would put a mechanism in place where if it was clear that the federal government was going to do some kind of similar, substantially similar, the same or substantially similar expanded advanced premium tax credits for plan year 2023, and that was known, DEVA determined that by a date certain, which was September 1st of this year, although there's been some debate about whether that is the appropriate date. Then if there were those substantially similar opportunities available, then the markets would remain unmerged for plan year 2023.
Right, and so now we have a bill which we walked through this bill? Because I'm skim reading it.
Yes, we walked through this bill. A lot of this bill was about the Federal No Surprises Act and Vermont, kind of putting in some Vermont provisions so DFR can enforce
I get this.
language on associations and trusts. And there's a insurance parity and residential
on Monday, or the day I was not here.
And so
Okay.
So people are advocating for an amendment to this bill?
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
I believe so. So I believe, just based on what I see in the document, that
Yes.
that it looks like Blue Cross is proposing to do not just a 1 year, but a permanent unmerging.
Right.
Is that right, Sarah? Or a permanent unmerging of the individual.
Sarah, you're muted.
You're muted, so we didn't get any of that.
Sarah.
Thank
We're
you.
asking you to permanently unmerge the marketplace.
Okay. That I'm getting. Now we figured out the logistics. All right. So Senator Sorokin.
Thank you, Jen. Last year, well, let me ask it this way. If we do nothing, does the market stay unmerged, or does it at some date go back to being merged?
Well, it's depends to some extent what happens with the language that is in some bill moving through the legislature right now that would extend that unmerger for an additional year. But the default is at some point it goes back to being merged unless you do something to permanently unmerge it. So they are kind of permanently merged, except you've been making some exceptions because of these federal opportunities. But once you stop making those exceptions, it will go back to merged.
Manager, I thought when we did this last year,
We did.
this issue of the possibility that the federal program wouldn't continue was foremost on everybody's mind. And there was assurances for the people who were pushing for the unmerger that if that happens, they were comfortable with it going back to the merged market. Are they no longer comfortable with that?
I think what we're hearing is we don't know what Congress is going to do. We have
Right.
pushed that date out as far as we can.
Right.
I think what's the point Sarah is making is this is what the numbers look like if we stay merged or if we unmerge under both scenarios. The feds do nothing and the expanded tax credits expire or they extend them. I think the problem is we're not going to be here to take action. And I think the other point I heard is the real winner in this game is the federal government, who doesn't, if we merge them, the federal government will pay almost $12 million less in credits. Have I got that right? Okay. So this has been a source of debate since I've been in this building. The merging and unmerging, there are how many people in the individual market? It's a small number. I'm looking at Michael.
30-ish, 32-ish or something.
Oh,
like
I
that.
was thinking 200. Okay. There's a small number of people in
Go to 32,000, right?
32,000 in the individual market.
Everybody buys.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, you should get Nolan to give you an accurate number, but it's in that range.
Okay. And we have been merging the small group, which are our small employers, with the individual market in order to give some protection to the individuals, because they tend to be lower income and have higher, they don't have employer insurance, they don't qualify for Medicaid. They're kind of hanging out there. So we've merged them, but it's never been denied that the small group, the employers group is subsidizing that individual market. And we've been doing this waiting game for as long as I can remember, trying to make sure that the individuals can get affordable insurance and that the small groups, the employers, can also afford their insurance. And then we had the whole exchange go in and federal subsidies go in, and this is just, the question has been, all right, now with all these subsidies, is it worth charging the small group to separate from the individual? And things keep changing. So,
Madam Chair?
yeah.
So Sarah, I'm still unclear. Has new information come forward since last year that would lead, I can't be anything but frank. I feel like this is an example of no good deed goes unpunished. We gave, at the request of business and insurers, we gave them a $17 million break because of the federal law could hold the individual market harmless. Now that's going away, and we highlighted that question. Now what we feared was going to happen happened, and the people who proposed this, I think, said up and down, no, we won't blame you for that if it happens. But now I feel if the legislature doesn't do something, we're going to get blamed. What is something happened in the interim? Because I do notice that it seems like you're saying that you can save small business $17 million, but it won't cost the individual people who remain unmerged $17 million. It will only cost them 1.9. I didn't know that was the case last year. Is that does some intervening thing happen here?
I believe I understand your question, Senator Sorokin. So what we're waiting on is for Congress to act, and we believe that they will act, but they may not act before the September 1st deadline. So that would be the worst case scenario, in which we remerge the marketplaces, the small employers pay 17 million more, and Congress extends those tax credits so the individuals are fully held harmless. And it's kind of a worst case scenario. So I'm asking you to not leave it up to an arbitrary deadline and make a decision to support the small businesses. So then the other thing that I believe is new is we had never provided you before, and this is our actuaries' analysis from Blue Cross, to be clear, but we've never provided you before an estimate of exactly who benefits from the merging of the marketplace. And I think to see that the vast majority of the benefit goes to those who don't receive any subsidies and are at the highest income level, and that those subsidizing them are small businesses, is new information that I thought would be helpful for you. And I believe is compelling, quite honestly.
This is the first time we've had an actuarial breakdown that I remember. We've always just talked about groups as a whole. Senator Sorokin, are you?
I'm not sure I fully understand.
Okay.
I'm not convinced, but I'll get there.
Okay, we got more testimony. Senator Hardy.
I just have a question, Sarah, on your table, to make sure I'm understanding it, the collective cost based on your analysis of keeping the of unmerging to that group of people would be 4.1 million. Is that the 3.3 plus the 0.8, the 0.8? Now I'm confusing myself, but what is the collective total?
So I should add it all up. So it's a $17 million cost to small businesses. That is made up of 4.1 to people who don't receive any subsidies under any circumstances. If the federal tax credit is not extended, it would be 1.9 to people who are above 400 and qualified under the special circumstances.
Okay.
And then there's actually a savings to those who always qualify. I'm not saying that very well, but it's because they cap out at the maximum amount of credit. And then the federal government saves 11.9 million under that scenario because they don't pay out tax credits to Vermonters. And then the state of Vermont, I'm taking into the account the little bit of match that the state of Vermont gives on our premium tax credit. And then the next column over is the same math if Congress acts.
Right, so if the worst case scenario, let's say, is the first column, that when they don't extend the credit, then the people who end up being losers, I hate that, winners and losers, but whatever, it's easiest, is people who are directly enrolled, and then the people who are not eligible for subsidies, so that's 3.3 plus 0.8, and then only eligible for the expanded tax credit, that's 1.9. So, right, if I add those up, it's 3.3 plus
0.8 is 4.1, and those people lost that already. They lost it last year.
Right, so that's total of 6 million, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So 6 million, and then the tax that Mike said approximately there are 32,000 people in this category, is that right? Trying to figure out how much we're talking about.
Yeah.
So what I don't know are the people by each one of those income brackets. I could get that for you. So it's about, I think it's between 30 and 35,000 for every individual together. And there's about 40 to 45,000 small businesses.
Okay, it's like $187 a person. Am I just not understand? I'm not sure I'm understanding.
You're doing this, the simple math, but that's the average.
I think that an average probably isn't fair, to be honest.
No,
So,
okay. Well, that would be really helpful to see what we're talking about in terms of the impact on individuals, because that scale is really hard for me to surmise by this chart.
Okay, and Nolan just emailed me, I have a feeling maybe the whole committee, a whole breakdown of who's in what group, and I think we will have Nolan on. I'm quite sure we're not going to rubber stamp this bill out of here today. Senator Pearson.
Well, I think that's sort of where well, I'm glad to hear we'll hear from Nolan. Maybe it's possible that there's only a downside, but that's pretty rare. And so I don't know if Mr. Fisher is
We've got
kind of a
he's
complete
here.
set of testimony.
Yes, he is getting set, and we have let me find my agenda, and we have Mr. Storo here, who represents MVP Healthcare, which is our second provider of health insurance.
Fast, Scarlett.
Okay. So I'm gonna have, unless we've got more questions for Sarah, and it sounds like we do, there's just some understanding of the actuarial findings and individual impact. And Mr. Storo, the floor is
Good
yours.
afternoon, committee. Chuck Storo here for MVP Healthcare. I want to say at the outset that MVP does not have any issues with H489 as passed by the House. That is DFR's healthcare housekeeping bill. This year, DFR split its housekeeping proposal into two parts. One of them is H515, which I think you're looking at tomorrow. And the other is dealing just with health insurance is H489. And they did that because in the House, the bills have to take different paths through different committees. So it was more efficient for them to do that in the, to split them in two to get it through the House. DFR did share H489 with us early on, and we have no issues with it. But nonetheless, I would like to address the merged, unmerged market issue. That was my understanding why I was invited to speak to the committee this afternoon. And just to recap, last year, because of the federal government did through the American Rescue Plan Act, increase the amount of enhanced premium tax credits that are available to people who buy individual policies, individual insurance policies. There was legislation enacted that for plan year 2022 only, the individual and small group markets were unmerged. They were merged back in, I think, 2011 or maybe 2012. Last year they were unmerged, so that it really created a kind of a win-win situation whereby the subsidy that these purchasers of small group policies essentially provide to purchasers of individual group policies would go away, but that the purchasers of individual group policies would be made whole by way of those enhanced federal premium tax credits. As I said, that will expire because the enhanced premium tax credits, as things stand right now, will expire at the end of this year. So there is language in the budget bill H740. It's section E 306.1, and there's identical language in section 4 of H 279, which passed the House and is in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, that would provide that if Congress acts to extend those premium tax credits beyond this year, by September 1, the markets would remain unmerged. To us, that seems like it's a no-brainer that at a minimum that either one of those bills, the language in either one of those bills pass, because it just, again, continues the win-win situation that was presented last year with those ARPA tax credits. So we would urge the committee to support the language in those bills. But I would also agree with Ms. Teachout that the committee should seriously consider permanently unmerging the markets. As it stands right now, there is a fairly substantial subsidy paid by purchasers of small group policies to purchasers of individual group policies. While if Congress doesn't act, those enhanced credits will not be available to people who buy individual policies. There will still be the pre-ARPA tax credits will be available. And I can't get into the details of the income brackets and et cetera, but for the most part, the people who need those credits the most will retain them. And so the impact isn't as dire as would otherwise be thought. And plan year 2023, the insurance premium rates for both the individual and the small group markets are going to be pretty stiff increases. General inflationary pressures. The hospitals want more money. The primary care providers want more money. And the independent pharmacists want more money, and all of them, to some degree, with justifications, want the more money. So it's going to be an expensive year, 2023, for health insurance premiums. And to layer on top of that subsidy going from the small group market to the individual group market is going to make it very difficult for Vermont small businesses to pay for health insurance. And given the under any scenario continuation of at least the pre-ARPA premium tax credits, we think on balance that it's a good policy decision to continue with the unmerged markets.
Okay. Questions at this point? Senator Saraki.
So Chuck, sort of a similar question. I'm still trying to hone in on this. If we go back and if we don't go back to the merged market, will the individual people who had the advantage of the merged market 2 years ago, will they be any worse off if the feds don't act?
Some of them may be, but as Ms. Teachout indicates, that may be primarily people in relatively higher income brackets. And I will say that there may be, and I don't understand, this is a Nolan kind of topic, a subsidy cliff, or there's something in the way this all interacts with each other where there is a cliff for people buying policies on the individual market in relation to the pre-ARPA premium tax credits. And my thought is that perhaps state dollars could be used to ameliorate that cliff to a certain extent. And my general understanding is that while of course there's always more demand than there is revenue, this is a relatively good year revenue wise.
I suggest you go sit in appropriations. That's not what they're telling us.
Well, that's what I understand, Madam
I
Chair.
think
So
it's
I
better
really
to
shouldn't
not
comment
know.
on that. I just see articles about an $8 billion budget.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking,
Is the offsetting balance here, what we haven't heard, and we did hear, well, we heard it more when we were doing the association allowances, is that if that 17.7 million is an extra cost to small business, small businesses, many of them, some of them are also struggling. And that before, and I don't know if there's any details, that small businesses are either cutting back on the richness of their plans, or they were ceasing to provide plans and just telling people go to the market and buy your own. And so to me, that was the balance, was we may be costing some group here, but there's that other group that may be losing their employer subsidy for their health care. If the employer just decides this isn't a benefit they can't offer, they'll offer more in wages or something. So I think we can say this is similar to Jell-O. It just kind of moves. I don't know if it's with the tide or what, but it's hard to pin down, but there's a lot of moving parts in this. Because I remember when the association plans were allowed federally, the testimony of employers that they, because of the reduced costs, they were now able to afford to offer health care or to offer better health care. And I think that's part of the balance that's going on here, isn't it?
to a certain extent, yes, Madam Chair, the association health plans, there was a change of policy at the federal level. So those are no longer available. So small employers do not have the option of purchasing small association health plans. And in fact, H489 has got some language in it regarding group definition of group policies or groups that kind of puts the final nail into the association health plan concept, which was already dead. So that means basically for small employers, your only option is to buy a small group policy, a so-called exchange plan. They're not really bought through the exchange, but they're subject to, the Affordable Care Act and the essential health benefits and all of that. And so that's the only place you have to go. I can tell you, in the case of my firm, not only do we lobby the Vermont legislature, but we have about 15 to 20 employees. We monitor legislation in all 50 states and provide reports to a variety of clients on that. And we have a bunch of relatively young folks that, we employ, and we provide health insurance. And over the last, I'm going to say 10 years, originally we paid 100% of the policy costs. And we've had to, because of increases, basically split those increases with our employees. You know, the firm continues to pay more each year, but we're now, you know, asking our employees to contribute more, and they have flexibility as to what kind of plans they want, if they want better. But, you know, a bronze plan with $3,000 to $4,000 deductibles, you know, they're over $15,000 a year. And, you know, that's a lot of money for, you know, as part of a compensation package. So it is tough for small businesses who want to do the right thing and provide health insurance. And given the fact that there's no premium tax credits for small businesses, but there are for purchasers of individual policies, you know, we would submit as a, you know, for your judgment as a policy matter that perhaps the market should remain unmerged.
Those $3,000 to $5,000 deductibles are where we're hearing a lot of the ability to access healthcare, because people don't have $3,000. So they end
That's
up
true.
paying for a good, if you're young and healthy, you're paying for your healthcare along with your health insurance. Or you're not accessing it. So,
They never meet their deductible.
right,
They have great insurance and you better not get sick.
right.
The problem with that is that if you want to buy a gold plan, it's just, you know, it's off the charts.
Yeah,
Yes.
$50,000 a year for a bronze. Yeah, with the employer. So I think that's the issue that we have struggled with. We were really struggling with those association plans. And fortunately, the federal government was somewhat schizophrenic, changed its mind overnight and put us out of our misery, because it was very, very difficult to listen to both sides of that issue and try and decide how you split the baby. So, Mr. Fisher, floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon. Mike Fisher here, healthcare advocate.
Good afternoon.
I guess I have to admit that I'm feeling pretty cranky at this moment. I'm going to try and hold myself together and make sense for you, but it's just incredible to me that we are here at this moment having this conversation, given the very recent history that happened in this room, apropos Senator Sirotkin's questions. And just, you know, and to remind you, you know, a little over a year ago, we at the Healthcare Advocate's Office looked at the numbers and decided with the premium, the ARPA premium tax credits, it didn't make sense to continue to merge the market. We called the chamber, we called Blue Cross, pulled together a little interesting trio that's, you know, that came to you last year and said, you know, let's do this. As long as there are ARPA premium tax credits, as long as the cliff that MVP just talked about is non-existent. And so, you know, the HCA continues to believe that with the substantial supports of ARPA premium tax credits, it doesn't make sense to merge the markets. The numbers are clear. But I do want to push back just a little bit about this concept of winners and losers in an insurance pool. And you know, just the whole concept, it flies in the face of what insurance is. Insurance is all about people who are more healthy, subsidizing people who are less healthy. You could divide this in 20 different ways, I'm sure. We're talking about business versus individual. We could probably find ways to describe this about regions of the state or income levels or who knows what. And it would all boil down to, how come I'm subsidizing somebody else? No, we put people together, as many as we can, into a pool to support the pool. So sorry, that's my vent. I would dispute the concept that it is only the people above 400% of poverty who were supported by the ARPA premium tax credit. So I would dispute the $2 million number. And I also, but let me just say, while I'm not going to attach myself to the $2 million number, I think it's more than that. I don't think you have $2 million under your desk, senators. And I do think there's reasonable ways to raise it. Again, I'm using the number 2 million. I think it's more than that. I don't think you have that money around. I think there are ways to raise it. And I, if the federal government is not going to act, I don't have confidence the federal government's going to act. I love Blue Cross's optimism that Congress is going to be able to act on this. I wish I could share that. I have no idea. I don't know if you do, but if there is going to be no federal, ARPA level premium tax credits, I think we could raise the money ourselves, and I think we could provide the level of support to the individual market so that to warrant a dividing of the market, to replicate. And there's good ways to raise the money. I know I've heard your committee talk about ways to raise money. There is an insurer fee, insurer tax that the federal government has been on and off for a number of years. It now seems to be permanently off. I think a state level insurer tax, much like that, could be used to raise the money to provide the subsidies on the individual market. And I think that would still be a win for everybody. I think also, I'll just mention a claims tax is a very broad mechanism to be able to raise money. It captures the self-funded market and could also be used. But I also have to recognize there is nothing fast about this. We could not possibly raise the money and direct DEVA to increase the Vermont premium assistance. They are not that nimble. So all of that said, strongly opposed to the concept that has been expressed here. I think there are ways that we could do it, but I have no confidence that the feds are going to act. And I remember very, very distinctly the reasons why we divided the market in the first place. That market was the previous individual market was in very serious trouble. And I don't want to go back to that.
Okay, Michael, what happens if the feds do act October 1st? Then we're unmerged.
Yes.
So what happens to which pool? Does one pool get more support than the other? Because we determine the pools. So if we merge them.
Doesn't the feds limit what we can do, I think?
They limit what we can do in home care. We put the pools together. So if they're merged and the premiums get expanded, what happens? That sounds like it would be the worst case scenario that I don't know if anyone would benefit. So it might help if we could get some numbers. I'm going to get Nolan in. I'm probably also going to let the chamber have, or somebody representing small business have a chance to talk. and
You know,
tell
Senator,
us-
let me go back to my first point. You know, when I sat before you a year ago with this conversation, I said out loud, I hope I don't regret this.
Mhm.
And I thought the questioning of your committee was very, very on point. You know, if this is 1 year, is it still worth doing? And I thought the answers to that were very clear.
I think the question is exactly what I just said. What happens if the feds act October 1st? Is that's your kind of risk thing that I think we're trying to balance. What are the risks?
And I guess I would ask, what happens if the feds don't act at all?
Senator Pearson.
So a couple of questions. Does anyone know if the expanded tax credits are part of the proposed Biden budget that was just introduced? Go ahead.
Senator, I asked that question of my client and the answer was, don't know, but about a half an hour before the committee met this afternoon, I got an email saying that there's a proposal for essentially a smaller Build Back Better bill in Congress that would extend the enhanced premium tax credits, and the Republican members in Congress were already criticizing it as providing money to people who didn't need it. So there's action on there. Whether or not it's going to move forward, I agree with Mr. Fisher. Who knows? And maybe not. I will say that at least the language that's in the budget bill and in H-279 would, if Congress acts by September 1, keep the markets unmerged. That, you know, would essentially perpetuate what the decision that was made last year by the legislature, and that at a minimum should, you know, continue forward, because there's no reason not to. It just creates a mechanism for that to happen after adjournment. And so.
All right, that brings up my second question, which is, I actually would like to go back and look at the tape, because I think to Mr. Fisher's point, it was a deal. And I remember, you know, I was on House Healthcare when we took Unmerged and merged them. Then I was on this committee when we did this temporary move. And so I'm wondering if anybody knows, maybe you, Michael, when that debate was, because I guess the details are confusing, but you know, the good faith effort is kind of how this building works, and it's important to me. So does anybody happen to know the date that I think, as I recall, we debated it very quickly in here. It was like a one afternoon kind of thing.
I don't have it off the top of my head, though. I know a member of my team recently looked at it, so we can get it.
If you could email me that, I'd be grateful.
Okay, Senator Siraki.
Thank you, Michael. So I have a series of questions. So last year, when we unmerged the market, the argument was that this would save small businesses $17 million in premiums. Is that correct?
I don't remember if it was 17 million, but yes, the argument
It
was.
save, I don't know if there was a number.
So I was asking, okay, fine. Anybody can answer, but I was directing the question
I
to
would
Mike
say-
Fisher.
Senator, yes, that it would save substantial monies for the small businesses and not harm the individual group.
That's right.
Right, but is it too simplistic to think that that $17 million in premium reduction for small businesses was effectively covered
Yeah.
by the individual market? So they would pay $17 million more in premiums, but that would more than be offset by this new federal tax credit. So they would be held harmless in that regard, right?
Yes.
So if the federal tax credit goes away, the individual people are left holding the bag with $17 million more in premium. I think I must be missing
The
something.
numbers at 1.9.
Except that there was previous and there still is a population in the individual market who get premium tax credit and therefore are limited on their family share. So
they weren't taking those credits before this change we made last year?
Well, they were, but while it existed during the ARPA subsidies, it still exists that for a certain set of people, a substantial group of people, increases in their premiums are, if their incomes don't go up, are borne by the feds.
So I think I'm understanding it a little better. So I guess what Sarah's saying is that because there's going to continue to be some premium tax credits, by going back to the or staying in the unmerged, it's going back to the merged market, the premium increase when the total out-of-pocket expenses for these 32,000 individuals will not go up 17 million, and only go up a fraction of that because there's still tax credits available. But we don't agree on what that number is right now, but there is going to be some pain. And the argument is that the gain to small business is worth the pain to the individual.
It's probably close.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one detail I would add in there is a recognition of this, this 400% of the federal poverty level cliff that that we struggled with pre-ARPA and may have to struggle with again. It's a big cliff. It can be $10,000 for a family who earns $1 over that income threshold. And it happens to, I know Senator Sirotkin, you have been focused on eligibility cliffs in other areas as well. It happens to fall in line with other cliffs in supports. If your kids are going to college, if various other things. And when you look at affordability, right in that sweet spot, just above 400% of poverty, people really lose substantial ability to make ends meet right at that point.
Well, I too would like to see the tape, because my recollection is that people who are proposing this told us up and down that if the tax credits went away, they were okay with re-merging the market. And now I'm reading that if we don't do what they want, we're being accused of taxing businesses extra.
Okay. Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say, I remember this debate. I don't remember exactly all the details of it, but I do remember it. And I think Sarah and I pinky sweared, or somebody and I pinky sweared that that this committee wouldn't get blamed, as Senator Sirotkin said. But to be fair, I don't think that's what Chuck and Sarah are doing right now. I didn't hear either of them say that. I think they're coming to us.
I didn't say they said, other people said.
Okay, I haven't heard that rhetoric. Perhaps it's out there, but I haven't heard it this time around. I heard it last time around, and that's why I was really concerned. And I think it was it Betsy?
It's in writing.
Okay. But so you've seen it. I haven't seen it, and I didn't hear either of them say that today. So I had the same concerns, and I just didn't want to be accusing people who didn't do it, because I don't think our witnesses did. Okay.
Okay. We're going to move on. I'm going to have Nolan come in and talk to us. Michael, if you can get us some numbers, I think, and, you know, we decided last year, but that was on top of the associations, which was on top of, it isn't like this is a one and done. This is an ongoing debate as the federal subsidies change, as the insurance market changes, as employers, the economy changes. What our goal is to get the most people in the best health plans. And to have a whole bunch of folks in a bronze plan with a $3,000 to $5,000 deductible, I don't think is the best plan. When we're in health and welfare, those are the underinsured that we're always trying to get into some primary care visits. So, you know, I think that's what we're struggling with. And who said what last year? The fact is, things change, and we're going to keep looking at it. Senator Bray.
So
We're going to move on to TIFs,
yes,
another favorite topic.
I don't have a proposal to make, but I'm just wondering, because we are a little hamstrung by not knowing when or who Congress will act, is there any way for us to respond with a contingency in the bill that lets us make a decision and put some sort of other provisions in case things do play out well? And I don't have the language for that, but I'm just thinking structurally.
But we had, right, like a January 1, you know, at least if these plans all exist, you know, I had the same thoughts there.
I thought we already did that.
Well, that's what we did
We
with
did till
September,
September.
and there was pushback from DEVA, there was pushback from, that said that was an unrealistic time frame. They couldn't do it because the enrollment, there's an enrollment date. And so you've got to know where you're enrolling. So if you enroll in November and the feds act in December, I'm gonna let everybody cogitate on that and you can come back to us, but that's what we did. If there's another way around that, we could take a
That's
look
why I'm not
at it.
making a proposal, but
Yeah.
there's enough moving parts, but I figured with this audience here, they may see a way to structure that.
And I think we have to have DEVA in on that group talk. See what we can do. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. You'll be back. All right, so we're going on, we're gonna be looking at TIFs. I gather that, is it, Michael, H-159 you sent us, that has a lot of TIF stuff in it. And the city of Montpelier sent over an email and they've got some issues with TIFs. So Bill, are you still there? We've got Abby Sherman from the Economic Progress Council. Bill, why don't you lay out for us and assume that we are still struggling to refocus our heads from health insurance. Exactly what issue the city of Montpelier is facing, you know, what's the status of the TIF district and what's happening.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for having us on, and thank you all. First, I want to be super clear that the folks at VEPSI, Abby and her staff and the folks before her have been super helpful with us trying to resolve this. So this isn't we're not here to complain about the state or anything like that. And in general, we don't have any problems with the TIF program as it stands now. In fact, we would like to see it expanded and made even more flexible. So just in general, we support, we've seen, for example, the good work that St. Albans and others have done with it and recognize the potential that's there. Montpelier, I hope this is simple. We are really simply asking for a reset. We enacted our TIF district a few years back. We set it, and if you're aware, you set your tax values at the time. And then when you issue your first debt, any increase in those tax values gets put into the TIF fund, including, the ability to tap into ed fund money to pay for infrastructure. Well, for various reasons, we haven't done that yet. Some of you are probably aware of the garage and hotel project that was lined up to be used for TIF and got derailed by the courts and COVID. But now we're in the midst of a reappraisal. And I think our concern is simply this, that we're going to see a whole bunch of values increase in our TIF district due to the reappraisal, but those aren't really the intent of TIF. I think the TIF fund is meant to capture new values from new construction, from improved, property value that way, not just because in 10 years it's appreciated in value. We would rather see all that appreciation go to our general taxpayers and not to our TIF fund. Now, I know that works differently in different TIF districts, and we don't want to do anything to change anybody else's plan. But for us, what we're simply seeking is the ability to basically reset our TIF district after we complete the reappraisal, which should be this coming summer, and reset our new values with that district so that all the old, that increase goes to the general tax base. And then start our 5-year project again and essentially start over. We're not asking to resubmit a new boundaries or go through anything else. And all of that would be a lot of work for Abby and VEPSI. I'll add that we have searched for other alternatives to this. As I said, VEPSI has been very helpful, but the statute, as I understand it, and I'm sure Abby can speak to this, doesn't really address this particular quirk. And one of our options was actually to have our TIF district expire and then reapply for it again after the reappraisal. That would then require a whole full new application, VEPSI's time, our time, consultant time and expense. But also, I think one of our concerns, frankly, is that in the TIF debate, there's some consideration being given to shrinking the number of districts in Washington County and here. So we would be at risk of losing the TIF district simply because we were trying to keep reappraisal new value from hitting the ed fund and that. So we think we're doing the right thing by the state. We think we're doing the right thing by VEPSI. We think we're doing the right thing by the city and seeking basically a simple legislative fix for Montpelier, not statewide policy, to allow us to reset. And so I hope that was clear. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. I guess, Bill, the idea of the TIF was that there would be normal background growth. So when we were assessing the value of the TIF, that it was reduced or added to by. So the question is, what is the background growth? And you're saying because you're doing a reappraisal, you're going to see a large jump in that background growth, even in your business reappraisals?
No. So the problem is that it's the increase in value in all properties in the TIF district. So if there was a vacant property and then you build a new one, well, all that new value is TIF money. That makes perfect sense. So again, using our hotel project, we're going to build a new hotel. That was going to create new TIF value, which would then be used to pay for the garage. Simple. And then any other new projects that might have been built that we're going to use the garage for parking, that revenue would help have paid off that project or any other TIF projects. Because of COVID, because of everywhere else, we've had very few background growth projects in our TIF district, but because of the appreciation of real estate value, we're estimating that these properties are going to appreciate. But that would mean all that appreciated value would go into the TIF fund rather than the general fund. And so that means it's not available to residents of Montpelier to help reduce their taxes. And it's really inflating money that hasn't been generated by economic activity. It's just been generated by the appreciation of property values. So whatever little background growth that's occurred, we're willing to forego and say, let's just do a reset and start again after the reappraisal, restart our clock, and just start as though we have a new district starting after the reappraisal, and not change anything else.
Okay, Bill, how long do you have before you have to actually borrow?
It's coming right up. I want to say March. Is that right? A year from now?
Okay, so you've got a year in which, but to date, you haven't done anything, borrowed, may have spent, but, okay. Committee questions, Senator Sirotkin.
So thank you, Bill. Is the situation you're in any more unusual than any other TIF district that hasn't gone out for borrowing yet? I mean, the whole state has gone through, well, you have the reappraisal coming up. Maybe that's the difference, but
That's the biggest difference for us. We're not seeking just, I think it'd be simpler if we were just looking for an extension of our borrowing time or that kind of thing, which we would need in general. But the reappraisal is really what's causing us concern. And as I said, and so, I think Abby maybe could speak better to what's going on in other TIF districts.
yeah. So Madam Chair, I want to be clear that the bill that we have on TIFs is nothing more than a replay of what we passed in the Senate. That we weren't trying to upgrade or change the TIF program. We were just saying, we passed this last year, so we didn't have Bill or other people in to talk about changes to the underlying TIF program. We were just saying, excuse me, and I should say, there's very little in our bill that applies to TIFs. It's all the project-based TIFs, the new program that we were trying to get established. And,
Which we support 100%, by the way.
right, so it's not, like we heard this, but it doesn't mean, given that that vehicle is going through, if this committee wants to change the underlying TIF program, they couldn't do that, but we didn't, that was not our goal.
Right,
And if I may be clear, we're not asking for any wholesale changes in the TIF program.
right. Bill, is the ed fund, right now, that whole property in the TIP program, because you haven't made any changes to it, it's still paying into the ed fund, right?
Correct.
So the ed fund is not losing.
Correct. But if we were to do the reappraisal and then borrow, all of that appreciated value just from the reappraisal would then be eligible to be used to pay off the borrowing and not from the ed fund. And, as much as with my city manager hat on, that'd be great to have, all that extra revenue available. I don't think that was really the intent of the TIF program. And I think from the general fund side, it's not really fair to the non-TIF district portions of our city that the growth within the TIF district isn't available to them on the grand list to set the tax rate.
Okay. So Abby, can you help us understand, and I think we'll have joint fiscal take a look at this, because I think the question is, we've done all of this because of impact on the ed fund and just trying to figure out, is the ed fund going to lose if we do this?
Yes, so
Appreciated value would be accredited to the ed fund, right? I mean, the property tax, if all these buildings appraise more, if we do a restart and the big property in the district goes up in value by $1 million, then that they're going to be paying property tax on that $1 million, both to the city and to the ed fund. Is that right?
yes, so
That's right.
if I could, Abby Sherman, Executive Director of the Vermont Economic Progress Council. I do want to clarify a couple of things. We have talked to other towns who were interested in a TIF district, and they were on the verge of having a townwide reappraisal. And our advice to them was to complete that first and then come to us for a TIF district. You're correct. So when Montpelier's reappraisal is complete, their property values will increase within the TIF district by a good amount, I would expect. And then when Montpelier incurs debt, the education fund will no longer get that tax revenue from those increased values. It will go into the TIF fund. So by restarting it, better protects the education fund. But it is very unique.
Senator McDonald's note, right? That's what I'm thinking. Right now, if that's your base, that money, so the increased value from a reappraisal, since nothing's been built, will go in probably 2/3. That's where the city was with its school taxes when I was there. 2/3 of that increase will go into the ed fund, 1/3 will go to the city's general fund. And then when they start construction of whatever, once they borrow, that increased value stays as being paid to the ed fund. It's only the appreciation.
So Mayor, we got old habits die hard.
All
Senator.
habits, I know.
Madam Senator Cummings was the
I'm
mayor.
not gonna find you a
Hired me
dollar
as city
like
manager, so
the
blame
lieutenant
her.
governor does.
So what happens is you set your values as of a certain date. I think it's called the original taxable value. So those have been set already. And then any appreciation from that value is what goes into the TIF fund. So we set our values back 3 or 4 years ago. And so when you add all this new value, that would be added to that original tax value. What we're asking for is to be able to reset the original tax value at a higher amount, so that from then going forward, only the sort of incremental tax growth from actual economic development will go into the
Yeah,
TIF
so
fund.
if we reset it, all the increased value from this reappraisal will be paid into the ed fund,
Correct. Yes.
rather than being withheld
Right.
and going into the TIF fund.
Correct.
Okay, so this should, and we'll have joint fiscal.
Yes, this should be good for the ed fund, and it should be good for the city's general fund for the general taxpayer. And
Okay.
And bad, I guess, for our TIF fund, because it won't get a big, huge artificial windfall.
Right, all right. So Senator Pearson.
Abby, I'm hoping you can help me understand, in Burlington, there's a rather high profile reappraisal happened a year ago. No doubt that impacts the TIF districts. One of them hasn't really done its investments. So I'm just trying to understand the impact beyond Montpelier of this kind of choice. I recognize the request is only for that district, but I've learned enough around TIFs that it tends to grow the opportunities that other districts see when these kinds of conversations come along. So could you help me understand specifically about Burlington, which I'm more familiar with, but then I guess more broadly, if this were sort of a practice in all the other districts, what would that look like, and would there be concerns?
So I don't foresee this being a practice in any of the other districts. You have to remember Montpelier has not incurred their first debt yet. And there was previously, years ago, there was some legislation that addressed reappraisals. It's since been repealed. I'm not really sure when, and I don't exactly remember what it stated, but I can imagine that it made the tax increment calculation far too complicated to implement. I don't know enough specifics about Burlington, other than, yes, that increased their taxable value increment. So it does appear that they're getting, they have that increase in taxable value increment, but there's also, you have to remember, the offset is the tax rates probably went down. I'm really not sure specifically with Burlington. I know South Burlington is also a little unique, but they're not, they don't seem to have an issue with it, in that their reappraisal, most of the property within their TIF district has had an appraisal more recently. So their reappraisal didn't affect the assessed values as much within their TIF district, which is also very small. But their tax rates went down. So as far as tax revenue that's going into the TIF fund every year, that is less for them. So, I mean, it's a case by case, but again, I don't see any other TIF district coming in with this problem. Montpelier does have one more year to incur TIF district debt. They can ask for an extension from VEPC for an additional 5 years to incur that first debt. So allowing them to reset their OTB leaves the door open for them on this TIF district, rather than closing it down and trying to come back with a new TIF district. There is in H159 some problems with some of the language as it was passed out of the Senate last year.
Well, we'll take that out. Yeah.
Okay,
Take that
yeah.
out another day.
That would affect Montpelier.
Okay, so we will, we'll look at that. I think I just wanted Mr. Fraser to explain what the issue was that Montpelier was looking at. And I guess the perfect storm is they haven't started their TIF district. They haven't put a shovel in the ground. They haven't borrowed any money. And it's the base that they're starting with. And they really would like, as the appraisal is being done, they'd like to be able to capture some of that increased value. It would get paid to the ed fund, the full value of the properties, and to the city. And then when the first shovel goes in, background growth from the parking garage or whatever else gets put in there or somewhere in the district would be what would be accredited to the calculations for the TIF payments.
From then forwards.
Yeah, and forward, okay. And we will have joint fiscal, and I think Becky Wasserman is the drafter on this.
Yes.
I don't know if she's available at the
She's
moment.
out sick with COVID.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Every time we talk about tips, I feel like we fall into a hole, or maybe it's just me. I'm like, oh my
Downtown
God.
Burlington.
Yes, Burlington and Newport know about big holes.
Exactly.
Bill, how much time, the other issue that always vexes us is the timeline for districts. So if this were granted, how much time do you have left to start using your TIF district?
So we right now have one more year left to incur our first debt. As Abby mentioned, we could apply for a 5-year extension.
Okay.
Where we don't want to do that because that would be under the old values. And so we'd be getting this windfall and the state, for all the reasons we've explained.
Yeah.
So we'd rather, what we're basically asking for is, can you just allow us to reset? We'd still get the 5 years like we were starting new. Basically, everything would stay the same, except we'd be resetting our clock and resetting our values once the reappraisal was complete.
All right. I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll get joint fiscal to take a look at this. We'll see, get Let's Council, hopefully sooner rather than later. And we'll take a look hesitate if we should have the auditor's office in, but we'll.
Actually, they'll like this because it's going to save them ed fund money.
Yeah, that's the one good thing about this, is it will actually get more money into the ed fund as a base, and that would be helpful. Okay, committee. Any other questions at this point?
Just one
Yeah.
process question, so Michael, Senator Sorokin, you said there's a TIF bill, but we've passed it out of here already. No?
No, there's
No,
a new
the-
H bill
the-
just
Oh,
showed
it's
up.
an H bill,
The
okay.
economic development bill has the mini TIF or the project-based TIF that we passed in the Senate last year.
And that's why
Oh,
it's
so
here.
long ago. Okay.
It just keeps coming back
It
like a
just
bad
keeps
penny.
coming back. Okay,
Was
Got
that?
it.
So we do have a vehicle, the word TIF is in that bill along with many other
I'm sorry,
words.
Chris.
And we do have a vehicle if we decide we want to do something.
it's the bill that just came to your committee, yeah? Or
It's
No, it
here.
just came here.
it just came here? Oh,
It's an
We
H,
voted it out last week.
got it,
Or-
okay.
yes. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Abby. We will have you back as we take up the rest of the TIFs. And Bill, we'll keep you posted and see where it goes.
I appreciate it very much and thank the
Yes.
committee for considering this. We're just in a weird spot, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, committee, that's it. We only lost a break in one topic today. I hope the floor gets under control. It's running over, yes.
Ready to